Jin Park's heart raced as Officer Dalek's cold metal scanner pressed against his wrist for the third time. The tall Proxian security officer loomed over him, eye stalks moving in that unsettling way that always made humans uncomfortable. Jin tried to stand tall, but at 6 feet, he was still dwarfed by the 8-foot alien. "Your identification appears questionable," Officer Dalek said, the translation device on his chest deliberately distorting his voice to sound more threatening. Jin knew his ID was perfect. He had worked in the Proxian Human Science Coalition for 5 years without issues. Until now. "There must be a mistake," Jin said calmly. "My clearance is up to date." Director Moons renewed it herself last week. The mention of the human director made Officer Dalek's skin patches darken with anger. The 4 metal tentacles that served as his upper limbs twitched noticeably. "A contamination alert was reported in Sector 7 at 1400 hours. Your ID shows you were present." Jin nodded. "Yes, I was there to collect samples from the new specimens. I have full clearance for all sectors as lead xenobiologist." Jin held out his research tablet, displaying his credentials and work orders. The screen showed his latest project: comparative genetic studies between humans and 6 other coalition species. The work was groundbreaking and had earned him respect among most alien scientists. Most, but not all. Officer Dalek's eye stalks swiveled to look at the tablet, then at Jin, then at the growing crowd of mixed species watching their confrontation in the busy transit hub. Without warning, one metal tentacle lashed out, knocking the tablet from Jin's hand. Before Jin could react, Dalek stomped on it with his heavy boot, crushing the device. "Evidence confiscated," Dalek announced loudly for the benefit of onlookers. "Potential contamination risk." Jin felt his face grow hot with anger and embarrassment. "That's 6 months of research data. You have no right." "Silence, human." Dalek cut him off. "Your kind always brings problems. Your biology is primitive, your technology inferior, yet you contaminate our systems with your presence." People were staring now. Humans, Proxians, and members of other coalition species watched with various expressions of concern, curiosity, or in some cases, satisfaction. Jin spotted 2 other Proxian officers watching from a distance, making no move to intervene. Jin knew what this was really about. 3 days ago, he had discovered something disturbing in his genetic research. The new Proxian military vaccine program showed signs of illegal genetic manipulation, not for vaccines, but for potential biological weapons targeting specific non-Proxian genetic markers. He had reported his findings privately to Director Moons, who had promised to take it to the Coalition Council. Now, Jin understood the real reason for his detention. Someone had leaked information about his discovery. "I need to see your research notes and access your lab immediately," Officer Dalek continued. "Suspected violations of Protocol 37B." Protocol 37B was the biological containment protocol, rarely invoked except in the most serious cases. It would give Dalek authority to seize all of Jin's research and lock down his lab indefinitely. "This is ridiculous," Jin protested. "If you check with Director Moons." "Director Moons is currently unavailable," Dalek interrupted, a slight vibration in his voice that Jin recognized as the Proxian equivalent of pleasure. A sudden emergency off-station. Convenient timing. Jin felt cold fear settle in his stomach. If they had removed Director Moons from the station, this went higher than he'd thought. The Proxian military division must be involved. 2 metal tentacles quickly produced restraints. "You will come with me for questioning. Your lab is already being secured." Jin looked around desperately. A few sympathetic faces in the crowd, but nobody would stand against Proxian security. "Not here, not on their station. This detention is unjustified." Jin said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I demand to speak with the Coalition representative." Officer Dalek moved quickly, clamping the restraints around Jin's wrists. They were painfully tight. "The Coalition representative is aware of the situation and has approved these measures," Dalek said smoothly. Security threats require immediate action. Jin doubted this was true, but he couldn't prove it. The crowd began to disperse, not wanting to get involved. Only a young Proxian female continued watching, her eye stalks fully extended in what Jin recognized as the sign of intense interest or concern. As Dalek began pushing him toward the security transport, Jin made a split-second decision. He turned toward the young Proxian observer. "My name is Jin Park. I'm being detained because I discovered illegal genetic weapons research. Contact Hannah Lee in legal services." Dalek's tentacle struck Jin's back, pushing him forward roughly. Silence. Spreading false information is another violation. Jin stumbled but managed to stay upright. He caught one last glimpse of the young Proxian. She had disappeared into the crowd, but not before Jin saw her make a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. As the transport doors closed behind him, Jin felt strange calmness replace his fear. In 5 years of human-Proxian relations, no human had ever formally charged a Proxian officer with misconduct. The political implications were too severe, the bureaucratic obstacles too numerous. But Jin now had nothing to lose. His research was likely being destroyed. His discovery about the weapons program would be buried. His career was effectively over. What Dalek and his superiors didn't understand about humans was their response to injustice. When backed into a corner, when treated unfairly, humans didn't always back down. Sometimes, they fought harder. Jin looked at his restraints and then at Officer Dalek's smug posture as he piloted the transport. "You've made a mistake," Jin said quietly. Dalek's eye stalks swiveled briefly toward him. "The mistake was allowing humans into our research facilities." Jin shook his head. "No. Your mistake was thinking I would go quietly." The transport hummed as it moved toward the detention center. Jin began planning his next moves. He would need legal help. He would need evidence. And he would need courage. No human had ever sued a Proxian officer before. Jin Park was about to become the first. Jin Park sat across from Hannah Lee in her small office. The space was cluttered with actual paper files, a rarity in 2187. And various legal devices that blinked and hummed. Through the single window, the artificial light of the human sector of Proxian Station 9 cast everything in a pale blue glow. "You're filing charges against a Proxian security officer." Hannah's voice held disbelief as she stared at him, her legal implant at her temple flashing red warning signals. The small device was standard for coalition lawyers, programmed to alert them to potentially problematic legal strategies. Jin nodded, touching the bruise on his cheek where Officer Dalek had struck him during the 3-day detention. "They took everything, Hannah. My research, my lab access, even my personal effects. They're trying to erase my discovery." Hannah sighed and leaned back in her chair. They had known each other since university days on Earth. She had come to Proxian Station 9 to work on interspecies law, hoping to make a difference. Mostly, she handled trade disputes and minor legal matters between humans and other species. "No human has successfully challenged a Proxian in court," Jin said, leaning forward. "But no human had evidence like mine before." "What evidence?" Hannah asked. "You said they took everything." Jin smiled slightly and tapped his temple. "Not everything. I had a backup neural storage implant installed last year when I started finding anomalies in the vaccine research. Everything I discovered is here, including Officer Dalek's behavior during my detention." Hannah's eyes widened. Neural storage was expensive and rare. Most humans couldn't afford it. More importantly, it was nearly impossible to detect unless you knew to look for it. "Show me," she said. Jin pulled a small connector from his pocket and attached it to his temple. Hannah's desktop screen immediately filled with data, images, and video logs. She spent the next hour reviewing the evidence, her expression growing more concerned. "This is serious, Jin. If what you found is accurate, the Proxian military is developing targeted biological weapons that could affect specific genetic markers in humans and Artesian species." "Yes," Jin said grimly. "The so-called vaccine program is a cover." Hannah's fingers danced across holographic documents as she searched legal databases. I found something else interesting. I cross-referenced Officer Dalek's service record with human detention reports. There are 27 similar detentions of humans by Officer Dalek in the past stellar cycle alone, all dismissed by his superiors without investigation. 27. Jin was shocked. Why haven't we heard about this? Because each case was isolated and the humans involved were pressured to drop complaints. Hannah explained. Most were threatened with loss of work permits or residency status. A few were simply transferred off-station. Jin stood and paced the small office. This is bigger than my research, isn't it? Dalek is part of a systematic effort to intimidate humans who might discover what the Proxian military is doing. Hannah nodded, still scanning documents. I think I've found something. There's an obscure provision in the Coalition Charter, Section 118.7, that allows species representatives to bypass local judicial systems in cases involving potential violations of Coalition founding principles. And biological weapons targeted at specific species would definitely violate those principles, Jin said. Exactly. We can file directly with the Galactic Judiciary on Centauri Prime. It would put your case beyond Proxian control. Jin stopped pacing. Will they take it seriously? They have to, Hannah said. Once filed, the case becomes public record across all Coalition systems. They couldn't bury it even if they wanted to. For the next 2 days, they worked tirelessly, preparing the legal documents. Jin transferred his neural data to secure servers, creating multiple backups. Hannah contacted trusted colleagues on Centauri Prime who agreed to receive and file the case. When they finally submitted the formal charges against Officer Dalek, and by extension, the Proxian Military Research Division, the effect was immediate. Their case became an overnight sensation on the interstellar networks. Human scientist CHALENG's PUROXIN Authority read the headlines across 1,000 worlds. Jin couldn't return to his apartment. Security concerns were too high now, so he stayed in a safe location arranged by Hannah's contacts. 3 days after filing, he met Hannah at a neutral location, a small cafe in the international sector of the station. The reaction has been stronger than I expected, Hannah said, sliding a data tablet across the table. 17 species representatives have contacted me offering support. The Artesians are particularly interested, given that they were also targeted in the weapons research. Jin scrolled through the messages, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. Any response from the Proxians? Hannah's expression tightened. Yes, and it was fast. The Proxian embassy has offered you triple your annual salary to drop this, she said, sliding an official contract toward him. They're calling it compensation for misunderstanding with a non-disclosure agreement. Jin picked up the contract, noting the substantial figure and the diplomatic language that carefully avoided any admission of wrongdoing. With this money, he could return to Earth, set up a private research facility, live comfortably for years. He pushed it away. This was never about money. Hannah smiled for the first time in days. I hoped you'd say that. Because there's something else. She lowered her voice. 3 Proxian scientists have contacted me privately. They claim to have information about the weapons program and Officer Dalek's role in silencing researchers. They're willing to testify anonymously. Jin's eyes widened. Proxians are willing to testify against their own government. Not all Proxians support what's happening, Hannah explained. Many in the scientific community are appalled by the military's actions. Your case has given them a chance to speak out. Their conversation was interrupted by Hannah's communication device. She checked it, her expression growing serious. The Galactic Judiciary has agreed to hear our case. They've scheduled preliminary arguments for next week on Centauri Prime. She paused. And they've issued travel protection orders for both of us. The Proxians can't legally prevent us from leaving the station. Jin exhaled slowly. So it's really happening. Yes, Hannah replied. her voice a mix of excitement and caution. But be prepared. The Proxian government is already mounting a strong defense. They're claiming this is a human plot to discredit them, that your research was flawed. Jin nodded, determination filling him. Let them. The evidence speaks for itself. As they left the cafe, Jin noticed they were being watched by individuals of various species. Some showed support with subtle gestures, others observed with careful neutrality. One thing was clear. Their case had changed the station's atmosphere. For the first time, someone had challenged the untouchable Proxian authority. "Are you ready for this?" Hannah asked as they prepared to part ways. "Once we go to Centauri Prime, there's no turning back." Jin thought of all the humans who had been silenced before him, of the potential victims of the biological weapons, of Officer Dalek's smug certainty that humans could be bullied into submission. "I'm ready," he said. "It's time someone showed them that humans don't back down from what's right." The maintenance corridors of Proxian Station 9 were never meant for human use. Jin Park crawled awkwardly through the narrow metal tube, following the small light of Hannah's guidance device. The air was stale and smelled of machine oil and alien chemicals. "Are you sure this is legal?" Jin whispered, bumping his head on a low-hanging pipe. Hannah glanced back at him, her face half illuminated by the blue glow of her device. "Not exactly, but we have a court order to access evidence relevant to our case. They're just being difficult about honoring it." 2 days had passed since their arrival back from the preliminary hearing on Centauri Prime. The Galactic Judiciary had granted them the right to review all evidence confiscated from Jin's lab, but the Proxian Security Department claimed the materials were misplaced during transfer. "How much further?" Jin asked, his knees aching from the cramped space. "Almost there. Sunwoo's directions are very specific." Jin had been hesitant when Hannah suggested involving Sunwoo. The man had a reputation for data extraction methods that existed in legal gray areas. But as former head of station security on Europa Base, Sunwoo knew systems like these better than anyone. They reached a junction where the maintenance corridor widened enough for them to stand. Hannah pointed to a small hatch marked with Proxian symbols. "Evidence storage should be directly below us," she whispered. "Sunwoo's maintenance drone is already inside, waiting for my signal." She tapped a sequence into her device. Moments later, they heard a soft whirring sound from beyond the hatch. "The drone is accessing the sealed evidence containers," Hannah explained. "It's using my legal credentials combined with a routine maintenance protocol. The system thinks it's performing standard preservation procedures on biological samples." Jin nodded, impressed despite his concerns. "How long will we have?" 10 minutes at most before the system requires secondary authentication." They waited in tense silence. Jin thought about how much had changed in 2 weeks. From respected scientist to detained suspect to the center of what was becoming the biggest legal challenge in recent coalition history. The preliminary hearing had gone better than expected, with the judiciary expressing serious concern about the detention procedures. The device in Hannah's hand beeped softly. "We're connected. The drone is transmitting data from your confiscated research tablets." They huddled together, watching as files appeared on Hannah's screen. Jin's heart raced as he saw his research notes, carefully organized experimental data, and the damning evidence he'd discovered about the vaccine program. But there was more, much more than what had been in his original files. "Wait," Jin said, "these aren't my files." Scroll down. Hannah's fingers moved across the screen, revealing document after document of classified research. Jin's eyes widened as he recognized comprehensive genetic maps of every major coalition species. "These are genetic maps of sentient species," Jin whispered, scanning the files. "Look at the detail: complete genome sequences, adaptive mutation profiles, immune response patterns. Officer Dalek wasn't just targeting me. He was protecting Commander Tox's bioweapons program." Hannah's face paled in the blue light as she understood the implications. They're isolating the adaptive gene sequences that make humans uniquely resilient. Jin nodded grimly. Humans adapted to survive on Earth's constantly changing environment. Our genetic flexibility is unmatched among coalition species. But look here. He pointed to a particular sequence. They're studying how to turn that against us. How? By creating targeted pathogens that would trigger our adaptive immune responses to overreact, essentially making our bodies attack themselves. Hannah looked horrified. That's a direct violation of at least 7 coalition treaties. And it gets worse, Jin said, continuing to scroll through the files. They've been collecting genetic samples from all human visitors to Proxian medical facilities for years, without consent. A warning light flashed on Hannah's device. We've got 3 minutes before the system locks us out. Download everything, Jin urged. Not just my files. All of it. As the download progressed, Jin discovered something even more disturbing. Records of experimental trials on isolated human tissue samples. The data showed devastating effects from the engineered pathogens. They've already developed prototype bioweapons, he said, his voice tight with anger. They're just waiting for authorization to produce them in quantity. The device beeped again as the download completed, just as warning signals began flashing from the hatch below. Time to go, Hannah said, disconnecting from the drone. Someone's coming to check the evidence room. They retreated through the maintenance corridors, moving as quickly as possible while trying to stay quiet. When they finally emerged in an unused storage room in the human sector, both were sweating and breathing hard. We need someplace secure to review all this, Jin said. Hannah nodded. I know a place. But first, we need help analyzing this data. There's too much for just us. Sunwoo, Jin asked. Yes. And I'm calling in another favor. My friend Minji. She works in Coalition Intelligence. She owes me from a case last year. 2 hours later, they gathered in a small, signal-blocked apartment that Sunwoo maintained under a false identity. The data specialist was nothing like Jin had expected. A quiet, middle-aged man with careful movements and intense focus. The security on these files is military-grade, Sunwoo said, his fingers moving rapidly across multiple screens. But the encryption patterns are familiar. Give me time. Minji arrived shortly after, a sharp-featured woman with the subtle eye implants that marked Coalition Intelligence operatives. She reviewed the files they had already decrypted, her expression growing increasingly concerned. This isn't just a rogue operation, she said finally. The authorization codes on these documents go all the way to the Proxian High Command. And look here. She pointed to a communication log. There are connections to officials in 3 other star systems. With Sunwoo's expertise, they soon uncovered a network of corrupt officials spanning multiple species and jurisdictions. The Proxian bioweapons program was just one part of a larger conspiracy. The genetic experiments, Jin said, studying a classified document that Sunwoo had just decrypted. They weren't just studying us. They were weaponizing human DNA against rival species. What do you mean? Hannah asked. They were using modified human genetic material to create weapons that could target specific weaknesses in other species, particularly Artesians and Centaurians. Jin pointed to a sequence of code. This would be devastating against the Artesian respiratory system. Minji nodded grimly. This explains the increased tensions between Proxians and Artesians in the past year. The Artesians must have discovered something. We need to take this to the judiciary immediately, Hannah said. This goes far beyond your case against Officer Dalek. This is about preventing a potential interspecies war. Jin looked at the mountain of evidence they had uncovered. What had started as his stand against one prejudiced officer had revealed something that could change the coalition forever. We'll need protection, he said. Once we present this evidence, we become targets for everyone involved in the conspiracy. Minji touched her communication device. I can arrange coalition intelligence protection, unofficially. But we need to move quickly. If any of these officials realize what we've discovered. She didn't need to finish her sentence. Everyone in the room understood the stakes. Officer Dalek's harassment of Jin had been merely the visible part of a much larger, much more dangerous conspiracy. Jin stood up, determination clear on his face. "Let's prepare the evidence for the judiciary. Our hearing is in 3 days. We need to be ready." As they worked through the night, organizing the evidence and preparing their case, Jin couldn't help but think about how a single act of standing up against injustice had led them here, to the brink of exposing a plot that threatened the peace of the entire coalition. The maintenance drone that had helped them access the evidence room had been discovered and destroyed. But it was too late. The truth was out, and no amount of Proxian interference could hide it now. The Galactic Courthouse on Centauri Prime stood as a monument to coalition justice. Its crystal dome captured and refracted the light from the system's twin suns, casting rainbow patterns across the polished stone floor. Jin Park tried to control his nervous breathing as he entered the massive central chamber. The room was designed to accommodate all 17 major species of the Galactic Coalition, with special seating areas for those requiring different atmospheric conditions or gravity settings. Jin's eyes scanned the packed gallery. Representatives from all 17 coalition species were present, their attention focused on the proceedings below. The case had grown far beyond a simple complaint against a prejudiced officer. It now threatened to expose corruption at the highest levels of multiple governments. "Are you ready?" Hannah Lee whispered beside him. Dark circles under her eyes revealed the toll of the past weeks, but her voice remained strong. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jin replied. Security was unprecedented. Coalition peacekeepers lined the walls, their distinctive blue uniforms and neutral species makeup designed to prevent any appearance of bias. Several had been assigned specifically to protect Jin and Hannah after the attempts to intimidate them. Jin thought about the threatening messages, the accidental system failures in their quarters, and the mysterious death of a data courier who had been helping them. Someone was desperate to stop this trial. The judiciary panel entered, consisting of 5 judges from different species. The chief judge, a tall Centaurian with the characteristic silver skin of her people, called the court to order. "This tribunal will now hear case number GC 7729, Park vs. Security Division of Proxian Station 9, she announced, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. Due to the expanded scope of evidence, the judiciary has agreed to consider broader implications beyond the initial complaint. Jin watched as Officer Dalek was escorted in by peacekeepers. The Proxian moved stiffly, his eye stalks partially retracted, a sign of stress or fear in his species. Behind him came his superior officers, including Commander Tox, whose large frame and elaborate uniform decorations marked him as a high-ranking military official. Hannah rose and approached the central presentation area. Her small human figure seemed especially vulnerable in the vast space, but her voice projected clearly. "Honored judges, representatives of the coalition, we present evidence that Officer Dalek's actions against scientist Jin Park were part of a systematic effort to silence discovery of illegal genetic research being conducted by the Proxian military." A murmur ran through the gallery. Several of the Proxian officials shifted uncomfortably. "These are serious accusations," the chief judge noted. "Please proceed with your evidence." Hannah activated the central display system. "We will demonstrate that not only was Jin Park unjustly detained for discovering evidence of prohibited bioweapons research, but that this represents a pattern of harassment and intimidation spanning multiple years and targeting scientists from several species." For the next 3 hours, Hannah methodically presented their evidence. The genetic research data Jin had discovered, the records of other scientists who had been detained, transferred, or intimidated, the network of officials across 3 star systems who had participated in the cover-up. Jin watched the judges' reactions. The Artesian judge seemed particularly disturbed by the evidence of weapons specifically designed to target his species' respiratory system. The human judge's expression grew increasingly grim as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. When Jin took the witness stand, he felt surprisingly calm. The fear that had followed him since his detention had been replaced by determination. He described his original research, his discovery of anomalies in the vaccine program, and the harsh treatment he had received from Officer Dalek. And you believe your detention was directly related to your discovery of the bioweapons research? The Centaurian chief judge asked. Yes, Jin replied firmly. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I reported my findings to Director Moons one day before she was suddenly called off station, and I was detained by Officer Dalek. The Proxian defense team tried to discredit Jin's testimony, suggesting his research was flawed and that he had misinterpreted routine security protocols. But their arguments seemed weak against the mountain of evidence Hannah had presented. As the first day of the trial concluded, Jin noticed something odd. Officer Dalek was watching him intently, his eye stalks fully extended in what Jin recognized as an urgent communication posture. More surprisingly, the officer seemed to be deliberately separating himself from Commander Tox and the other Proxian officials. During the recess, as Jin waited in a secure anteroom, a peacekeeper approached him. Someone wishes to speak with you, the peacekeeper said cautiously. Officer Dalek has requested a private meeting. Jin exchanged a glance with Hannah, who nodded cautiously. I'll come with you, she said. The peacekeeper led them to a small conference room where Officer Dalek waited, flanked by two more peacekeepers. The Proxian's usual confident posture was gone, replaced by what appeared to be nervous agitation. 5 minutes, the peacekeeper said, stepping outside but leaving the door partially open. Officer Dalek's voice was low, his translation device set to minimal amplification. Your evidence is more comprehensive than we expected. Jin said nothing, waiting. Commander Tox is not pleased, Dalek continued. He has already arranged for the elimination of 3 potential witnesses from our research division. They were called back to Proxia Prime for consultation and never returned. Hannah stepped forward. Are you saying Commander Tox is killing witnesses? I am saying, Dalek replied carefully, that Commander Tox will eliminate all witnesses to protect himself and the program. I was following orders, but I have no wish to be eliminated when I am no longer useful. Jin studied the officer who had detained him, destroyed his research tablet, and treated him with such contempt. What are you suggesting? I will testify against Commander Tox in exchange for protection, Dalek said, his eye stalks swiveling nervously toward the door. I have served under him for 7 years. I know details about the program that even your evidence doesn't reveal. Hannah's expression was skeptical. Why should we trust you? Because I can provide the one piece of evidence you're missing. Proof of direct orders from Proxian High Command authorizing the bioweapons development. Jin and Hannah exchanged glances. If true, this would elevate the case from corruption by individual officers to an official violation of coalition treaties by the Proxian government. How? Jin asked. Officer Dalek touched a concealed pocket in his uniform. All security officers are assigned AI assistants to record our activities and support operations. Mine has recorded every order I've received for the past 7 years, including commands to detain scientists who came too close to discovering the program. And you're willing to submit this as evidence? Hannah asked. I am, Dalek replied. My loyalty to Proxia does not extend to supporting illegal weapons that could destabilize the coalition, and I have no desire to be silenced permanently when Commander Tox decides I know too much. When the trial resumed the following day, the gallery buzzed with excitement. Rumors of Officer Dalek's defection had spread overnight. Commander Tox and the other Proxian officials watched with barely concealed anger as their former subordinate took the witness stand. The final evidence presented to the judiciary came from Dalek's own AI assistant, a small device that projected the recorded conversations between Dalek and his superiors. The recordings were damning, showing clear orders to intimidate scientists, falsify detention records, and suppress evidence of the bioweapons program. Most significantly, the AI had recorded a direct communication from Proxian High Command authorizing the continuation of the program despite knowledge of its violation of coalition treaties. As the recordings played, Jin watched the faces of the judges. Their expressions had moved beyond concern to open alarm. This case had transformed from a human scientist's complaint about mistreatment to evidence of a potential threat to interspecies peace. The chief judge called for an extended recess, announcing that the judiciary would require time to consider the unprecedented scope of evidence presented. As Jin left the courtroom, surrounded by peacekeepers, he caught a glimpse of Commander Tox being detained by Coalition security officers. The commander's eye stalks were fully retracted in what Jin now knew was the Proxian expression of extreme fear. The trial that had begun as one human stand against injustice had exposed a conspiracy that reached across star systems and threatened the foundation of the Coalition itself. And it wasn't over yet. The judiciary's decision came after 5 days of closed deliberations. Jin Park stood before the crystal dome of the Galactic Courthouse one final time, his heart pounding as the 5 judges entered the chamber. The gallery was even more crowded than before, with additional security measures in place after threats against the court. The chief judge's silver skin caught the light as she stepped forward. The room fell silent. This tribunal has carefully considered all evidence presented in case GC 7729, she began, her voice solemn. We find the actions against scientist Jin Park to represent serious violations of coalition law and personal rights. More significantly, the evidence has revealed a conspiracy of extraordinary scope and danger. Jin felt Hannah's hand briefly touch his arm in support. They had worked tirelessly for this moment, facing threats and obstacles at every turn. The judiciary hereby orders the immediate cessation of all genetic weapons research by any coalition member, the chief judge continued. 42 officials have been identified as complicit in this illegal program and are hereby removed from their positions of power, with criminal proceedings to follow. A murmur ran through the gallery. Several Proxian officials were already being escorted out by peacekeepers. Furthermore, the Proxian government, having been found complicit at the highest levels, will face severe sanctions until a complete restructuring of its military research division is completed and verified by coalition inspectors. Jin watched as the Proxian ambassador's eye stalks drooped in a sign of defeat and shame. This ruling would change the balance of power throughout coalition space. Finally, in recognition of the courage shown by scientist Jin Park in bringing this matter forward despite personal risk, this tribunal awards substantial compensation and recommends special recognition from the Coalition Council. Outside the courthouse, media representatives from dozens of worlds crowded around Jin and Hannah. The case had become the biggest news story across Coalition space, with constant updates on the far-reaching implications of the ruling. "What will you do now?" asked a reporter from Earth's global news network. Jin considered the question. His scientific career had been permanently altered by these events. He could never return to simple lab work after what he had experienced. "I believe there's more work to be done," he replied. This case revealed how vulnerable minority species can be within the coalition. "I plan to use the compensation to establish an interspecies rights organization that can help others who face similar injustice." In the months that followed, Jin's vision took shape. Working with Hannah and other allies from multiple species, he established the Coalition Equal Rights Initiative. They opened offices on 12 planets, prioritizing areas where tensions between species ran highest. The initiative provided legal assistance to individuals who faced discrimination, monitored compliance with coalition equality laws, and advocated for new protections when gaps were discovered. Jin's experience as both a scientist and the center of a landmark legal case gave him unique credibility with officials and ordinary citizens alike. Meanwhile, Jin's original research, the legitimate study of genetic adaptations that had led to his discovery of the weapons program, was finally published and recognized. Working with ethical scientists from multiple species, he developed the findings into medical applications that could be used to treat previously incurable conditions across different physiologies. A treatment based on human adaptive genes proved particularly effective against a respiratory disease that had plagued Artesian colonies for generations. When the first Artesian children were cured, their government declared a national holiday in Jin's honor. Humanity's standing within the coalition transformed dramatically. Once viewed as tolerated newcomers, barely accepted into the interstellar community, humans became respected advocates for justice and scientific progress. Human representatives were appointed to key positions on coalition committees, and human diplomatic missions received unprecedented cooperation. The case established new legal precedents protecting all minority species. For the first time, the Coalition Legal Code explicitly recognized that power imbalances between member species required special protections for more vulnerable populations. Thousands of individuals benefited from these new safeguards. Officer Dalek, granted protection in exchange for his testimony, disappeared into a coalition witness security program. Few knew what became of him after the trial, though rumors occasionally surfaced of a Proxian working with humanitarian missions on the coalition frontier. 5 years passed. Jin's organization had grown beyond his original vision, with branches on 24 worlds and a staff representing all 17 coalition species. He traveled constantly, speaking at conferences and meeting with government officials. On a routine trip to a medical conference on Europa, Jin received an unexpected message, a simple request for a meeting at a small cafe on Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons. No signature, just coordinates and a time. His security team advised against it, but something about the message's simplicity convinced Jin it was important. He arranged to visit the cafe during a scheduled layover, bringing just one security officer who waited discreetly outside. The cafe was nearly empty, a quiet place where different species could enjoy their preferred refreshments in a neutral environment. In the furthest corner sat a Proxian with faded markings and eye stalks that showed signs of age. Jin recognized Officer Dalek immediately, though the years had changed him. The Proxian's once vibrant skin had dulled, and the metal tentacles that served as his upper limbs moved more slowly than Jin remembered. "Thank you for coming," Dalek said as Jin sat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "I was curious," Jin replied honestly. The witness protection program must have ended 3 years ago, Dalek confirmed. "I've been working as a medical aide on frontier worlds." It seemed appropriate. Jin noticed that Dalek's translator no longer distorted his voice to sound harsh. "A small but significant change. The reforms you started have changed our society," Dalek said, his eye stalks focused steadily on Jin. "Proxia has new leadership, new priorities. The Military Research Division has been completely restructured with coalition oversight." Jin nodded. He had followed the changes closely through his organization's monitoring systems. "My prejudice nearly concealed crimes that would have harmed billions," Dalek continued. "For that, I can never fully atone. But I wanted you to know that your actions didn't just change laws and policies. They changed individuals too." Jin studied the Proxian, who had once treated him with such contempt. "Are you looking for forgiveness, Officer Dalek?" "No," Dalek replied. "Just understanding, perhaps. And I'm no longer an officer, just a citizen trying to make better choices than before." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history between them. Outside the cafe's windows, ships arrived and departed from Ganymede's busy spaceport. Humans and aliens of all species moved together through the terminal, a daily demonstration of the Coalition's continued existence, despite the crisis that had threatened it. "Sometimes justice requires one person willing to stand against a corrupt system," Jin said finally. "But lasting change requires many people choosing a better path forward, even former enemies." As Jin left the cafe, he reflected on how a single moment of decision, his choice to challenge Officer Dalek's unjust detention, had set in motion events that transformed an entire interstellar civilization. Not by force or revolution, but through the steady application of law, science, and the simple courage to stand up for what was right.